I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, I'm delighted to welcome to the show a very talented author. His name is John Bartolotta. He delves into the murky waters of moral ambiguity with his gripping thriller called Fierce. This riveting novel follows Nino, a tormented vigilante, as he navigates the thin line between justice and darkness in his quest for retribution. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank our team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put him in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support writers like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing page turner of a book. The links are below this interview. Great to see you here on Spotlight, John.
Thank you for having me, Logan. It's really a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. This is a great story. It has Hollywood written all over it. I could see it as a movie for sure. But let's start by telling the folks at home a brief overview. What's the story about?
Story's about Nino Ferrucci. He's a young man who grew up in the Bronx in a close-knit Italian family in the 50s and 60s. And his relationship with his father was strained. His father taught him the meat business at an early age, but he never felt any love. There was beatings and there was embarrassing slaps. He feared his father, but had no connection. Early years, he experienced some disturbing acts of brutality that affected him, and that it drew a mania for violence from him. As he was in school, he was an antisocial kid, and it bothered him to see the bullies taking advantage of the weaker and more timid boys, and it angered him. He graduated high school. He was drafted into the military, and he was sent to Vietnam. And while he was in Vietnam, it stirred an energy to punish those he perceived as evil. And he carried that back home with him. And it led him to a life of becoming a self-proclaimed vigilante.
Yeah. It's a great premise. It's a great character. He's very, very layered. I love that. Everything's kind of explained in his background. Did you ever know a guy like Nino? Did you grow up in the Bronx?
Yeah, I grew up with people, and I've had some experience of my own, which I kind of put into the character myself. Yeah. It's an interesting story. It carried me back to the younger days when I'm not a young man anymore. I'm 77, so right. I'm starting this venture late in life.
It's never too late to start an adventure as long as you start. And that's what matters. And I'm sure it's a very exciting chapter for you. And plus, kind of a cool walk down memory lane. You're recalling those neighborhoods back in the Bronx. This guy from the corner whose father was this, and you take all those pieces that you were exposed to when you were younger, and you embellish and you exaggerate and you imagine and you create your characters. And I think that's why you've got such a great character there. And growing up in the Bronx in the 50s and 60s was a wonderful time in the Bronx. There were a lot of great Italian neighborhoods, a lot of close-knit families. What part of the Bronx did you grow up in?
Oh, it was the Morris Park section by Pelham Bay Park.
Love it. I used to go to Patricia's, a restaurant in Morris Park, all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great place.
Yeah, it is a great place.
There are a lot of times.
I'm a Fordham University kid, so I know the Bronx.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So what was your first book? Tell us a little bit about your writing journey.
My first book, it was actually a children's book called Fry. And it was a story about a frog that I used to read, that I made up when I put my son to bed at night, and he used to love to hear it, so I would tell him the story about Fry. And that was actually the first thing I wrote. And that's the reason, if you notice, all my titles begin with an F, because going back to Fry.
That's great. That's great. And this one, of course, is Fierce. And your other books are novels for adults?
Yes. Yeah, they're all thrillers. Fina, the trilogy, is a 3-book series that I combined into one volume. And it takes the lives of these 3 people that kind of come together at the end. Very interesting story about a young girl that has a horrific experience as a child, and she's separated from her parents, and she's put into an orphanage. And things happen in the orphanage, and she escapes into this adventure where she meets these other 2 people. It's a pretty good story.
Sounds like a great story.
Then I have Family Secrets. It's about the death of a multimillionaire, and he's leaving his fortune to heirs that he has never met. And as they meet in the mansion, there's some murders and it's a mystery. And actually, the police officer that investigates that series of crimes is in Fierce. I brought him back, Sam Blanco.
Very cool. Very cool that you're resurrecting characters from other books. I'm sure your readers really enjoy that. I think what's interesting about Fierce is that people can relate to Nino. I mean, if you think about Dirty Harry, if you think about Charles Bronson's character back in the 70s, whatever that movie was called, when he was a vigilante, people understand vigilantes because they get sick and tired of the bad guys getting away with it. And let's face it, today the cops completely have their hands tied behind their backs. Even
Absolutely.
if they arrest them, they're released. So in this era of where you feel like their crime does pay, that there has to be somebody who helps them pay a price, and that's a vigilante like Nino. Don't you think that's what's appealing, particularly in this era
Absolutely.
right now?
That's kind of why I wrote the book. He as a person, he's really a nice guy.
Right.
But he's got this beast inside him that has to come out. It has to be satisfied. And it took a lot of pleasure in writing it and interacting with the characters, like the cop, Sam Blanco. I try to give a little side story to what was happening with him. You know, he's a hard-nosed cop, and then he's kind of falls in love with Christina, and you see a softer side of him. And then as it comes together and develops into, I think it's a pretty good story.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great story.
Pardon me.
Have you envisioned it as a movie? I touched upon that at the beginning of the show. And who would play Nino?
Who would play Nino? I saw an actor that I don't remember his name, but he did kind of a vigilante movie. And there was 2, and I just can't think of the name right now.
Well, also the names today are, if it's not De Niro, Pacino, or somebody like that, I can't remember either. But all of the Italian-American actors are getting too old for the role. We need a new generation of Italian-American actors. That's for sure.
This guy's a young Italian actor. I just can't think of his name offhand.
Yeah. But I'm sure Hollywood would have a fun job casting the role of Nino because it's a great character. Is there a message that you're hoping the audience gets from your story?
People carry a lot of baggage, and you really don't know what people have inside, and they're easily misjudged. Like Nino, for instance. Nino is really a nice guy. Very quiet. He's introverted, keeps to himself, but he's very pleasant when he meets people, and he's grateful for acts of kindness that he's found in the story. But then on the other side, he converts into this evil monster that is very brutal and violent, and he makes those who he perceives as evil, he makes them pay the price.
I think that dichotomy of human nature is what makes characters interesting and what makes people interesting. Because, monsters are not monsters 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I mean, just like we saw with Tony Soprano, he could be a loving father one moment and a vicious murderer the next, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wonderful. Are you working on a sequel to Fierce? It feels like it could use a sequel.
I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. This new one I came out with, Fedora, that should be out soon. I'm gonna have a sequel on that one. That's another interesting story.
Now, fedora makes me think of a detective wearing a fedora. So tell me a little bit about that.
Fedora is actually about a young man in Sicily who becomes connected with the mafioso.
Mm-hmm.
And while he's coming up, he goes into a gypsy tent, and there's a fedora hanging on a rack, and he puts it on, and he immediately transforms into something else. Mm-hmm. And he tells the gypsy that he wants to purchase the hat, and she says, "You can't buy it. The hat selects its wearer, so it's yours." And it takes him on an adventure of.
It sounds like a great premise. And it starts there in Sicily, right?
Starts in Sicily.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, looking forward to reading that one as well. Is that one out now or about to come out?
I'm working on it. It should be coming out soon. Yes.
Awesome, awesome. Well, the name of this book that John has written that we primarily focused on today is called Fierce. It's a riveting novel that follows Nino, a tormented vigilante, as he navigates the fine line between justice and darkness in his quest for retribution. It's a riveting book. It is a compelling character. It is a true page turner. It will remind you of old New York, Bronx neighborhoods that I'm familiar with. And it really brings back that whole era to life. You'll love reading Fierce. John, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you very, very much, Logan. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure is all mine, my friend. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.